Warm welcome to all. Today, we mark this date as an event to help us all gain knowledge about the ABC of finance and the healthcare system and the way forward. Hence, to guide us, we have Mr. Joseph Pasangha, a guest for today's session. Mr. Joseph Pasangha is a postgraduate from Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, and a healthcare executive with 18 plus years of success in reviving loss-making hospitals by inspiring teams and boosting performance through people-focused hospital administration. Mr. Joseph had been managing Narayana Health Raipur before joining Narayana Health City as COO. As the Regional Director South, he has the added responsibility of managing the affairs for Karnataka cluster besides being in charge of Health City cluster Bengaluru. He is responsible for optimizing the synergies across the units in the South region to promote the establishment of a hub and spoke model for Narayana Health in the region. Sir, it's an honor to have you. On behalf of the Institute, Director, staff, and students, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. Sir, I request you to take over the session.
Thank you so much. So nice to see all of you back to your classrooms after a long online education thing. It's been a long haul. I'm sure you must be nostalgic to get back to your classrooms and to see your teachers face to face. Great. Yeah. So I'll start with a small overview of healthcare and what kind of an economy it is. So when I ask people what drives the 21st century economy, which is the largest industry, I get a lot of answers. One of the first answers I get is the IT, which drives the 21st century economy. Then they say automobiles. You'll be surprised to know what industries drive the 21st century economy. So apparel, that is your clothing and textiles, drives about 1.4 trillion US dollars, which constitutes the growth in economy for the 21st century, followed by energy, which is about 1.4 trillion US dollars. Then comes media, which is again accountable for about 1.7 trillion US dollars. Automobile constitutes to about 2 trillion US dollars. And IT is about 3.4 trillion US dollars. Food and agriculture comes second with $8 trillion. And the largest industry which drives the 21st century economy is none other than healthcare. It constitutes about 8.2 trillion US dollars. So that's the scope and scale at which we are talking. So a brief overview of before I go into the ABC of finance and how hospitals work. The different models of the hospital come up. So you have greenfield hospitals, you have brownfield hospitals, you have operate and manage hospitals. So these are different business models that hospitals work on. So when you say greenfield, so we're talking about when the investment, when you buy land, sink capital, construct a building, and start a hospital. So largely these greenfield projects are meant for tertiary care hospitals. When you say tertiary care, we talk about high-end, cutting-edge work. Those are tertiary care. So you have tertiary care, you have secondary care, and you have primary care. So tertiary care is one of those hospitals which does very complex procedures, surgeries, cutting-edge technology. Secondary care is something which does your bread and butter thing, regular work, regular surgeries, regular medical care, hospitalizations. And then you have primary, that is more like a PHC, primary health care, just the basic health care which is provided to patients. So these are different three structures that we work on. So I told you about greenfield is tertiary care. So then we can have a ground, but in tertiary care, when you see greenfield, you're seeking capital. So when you sink capital, the return on investment or ROI is going to take that much more longer, minimum of 3 years. And then you can't, so for example, in my organization, we have about 30 hospitals across the country. All of them cannot be tertiary care because you will be stuck with debts, huge debts, and you will have a problem with cash flows. So you go on to the second model, that is brownfield. When you see brownfield, it is when you acquire a running hospital and then manage that hospital. You run that hospital, so you could take it over for a lease, or you buy over a complete takeover of a running existing hospital. That's called a brownfield. So that is a little more asset-light because you're not sinking capital. Somebody else has built the building and constructed the hospital there. And you already have equipment in place. You just start taking it over, maybe on lease or maybe an outright sale. And that's called a brownfield project. Then you have O&M. And O&M is an operate and manage. So where somebody has already invested on a project, invested on a hospital, you just give your management expertise and manage the hospitals. So this is an extremely asset-light model where you're not, again, seeking any much capital. You're not borrowing money. You're going to run the hospital for them. It could be for various purposes. Probably they're not running properly, or there are issues, bandwidth issues. There's a professional entity having run hospitals for so many decades. We as an organization step in and say, listen, I can run this for you, and then at the end of the month, I can give you so much of the revenue share on the profits earned. So those are three different large models that hospitals work on: greenfield, brownfield, and O&M. So in a nutshell, when you say ABC of hospitals, we're talking about A is for analysis of financial ratios. So anyone to run a hospital, very important for them to have a grip on how to analyze financial ratios. B is for budget planning. Any organization, not only a hospital, any organization need to have a planned budget before they start operations. C is for comprehending key financial ratios. So these are the three things of ABC. When you say ABC, you're talking about analysis of financial reports. B is for budget planning. C is for comprehending key financial reports. So that's the ABC. So you start. Let's start with budgeting. That's what comes first. We'll go to ratios and things later. So there are many kinds of budgeting. You have capital budgeting. So at the beginning of the fiscal, we all do a capital budgeting. That is, what is capital budgeting? So you say what is the capex required for that particular year or for the next 3 years? Usually capex budgeting is for the first 3 years. So it could be equipment, could be infrastructure, could be that you do a cost benefit analysis and get how much can you spend on the capital thing for the next financial year or the next 3 financial years. So that's called capex budgeting or capital budgeting, right? Then, so that you say, okay, fine, this is, so you do also do a projection on your revenues, and based on those projected revenues, you define how much capex can be invested, which generally should be around 2% of your projected revenues. So that's capex budgeting. Everything has a numerical thing for it and a formula. Then you look at operating budget. What's an operating budget? An operating budget defines what are the expense that you incur. What is the top line that you will achieve? What is the contribution margin that you will achieve? What are the bottom lines that you will achieve? Based on that, because cash flows is very important. When you say cash flows, so a hospital can keep making a lot of top line revenues. But then if you don't have liquidity, if you don't have cash flow, for example, you will have, so in the hospital industry today, at least in India, sadly and unfortunately, most of the hospital expenditures go out of pocket. That is, they pay cash. We don't, unlike the NHS system, we don't have a large public healthcare insurance system in India. And then, but then you have employee state insurance, you have ECHS, you have large schemes which pay. In fact, Narayana Health, my organization, one of the pioneers in starting this scheme. That's a micro health finance scheme. So what happens? They don't pay money upfront. So lastly, the government pays a part of it paid by the patient, but the money, so the patient can get treated, but the payment comes to you later. So it could be after 3 months, it could be after 7 months, it could be after 8 months. So but you already render the patient services. So that's why when the patient's receivables are still aging, so you don't get the money out. So for that, it's very important. So that means you're blocking cash flows. You're blocking cash flows because you rendered the treatment to the patient. You incurred costs on consumables, on pharmacy, on medicines, on equipment, on doctor payments, nurse payments, employee, all the overheads. But you've not got the money up front. You will get the money after 4 months, 5 months. So what happens then? You are choking your cash flows. So when you choke your cash flows, you don't have money to pay the vendors, so you borrow money from the banks. So it's very important for you to define how much of this scheme patients, the insurance patients that's not going to pay you money upfront, how much of that you're going to do. So that's again we define in the operating budget at the beginning of the fiscal. Then you have a cash budget. What is the cash budget? Again, it's important for us to understand the cash budget because again on a cash flow perspective. This is the prime reason for the cash budget because in the present era of 30 to 50% of services provided on a credit basis by the TPAs, medical insurance and corporates. So again, it's very important for you to define what is your cash budget at the beginning of the financial year. Then comes your analysis of financial group. So those are three large budgets that you're talking about: operating budget, capital budget, and cash budgets. Then you come to your financial reports. I'm sure you must have read in your textbooks on all of you would be aware of when we say balance sheet. What is balance sheet? Assets and liabilities, right? Assets and liabilities. How do you analyze a balance sheet? So you have how much of assets are there, how much of liabilities are there. What are assets? Assets in a hospital could be your equipment. It could be your MRI, your CT scan, your operating theatre. All those biomedical equipment are your assets. What are your liabilities? Suppose the hospital borrows an X amount of money from the bank and which you need to pay back. Yeah, that's a liability. So that defines largely your balance sheet. And then again, you need to have those reports every quarter and you analyze your balance sheet. Are you making losses or are you making profits? Of course, then you have a P&L, which again explains to you. The P&L is another report which comes to you. That's a profit and loss count. When you say profit and loss, you're talking about the top line, that is your gross revenues. Then your net revenues, that is minus the cost that is incurred on getting that income. That's your net revenue. Then you have a contribution margin. A contribution margin is your after you deduct your consumables, your pharmacy, medicines from the thing and go towards the contribution margin that you have. And then comes your overhead expenses, fixed expenses, and your variable expenses. Then at the bottommost is your EBITDA. What is an EBITDA? Earnings before interest, tax, and amortization. So that's why it's called an EBITDA. That is your bottom line. So these are fundamental reports that every hospital administrator has to analyze because if not, you will not know whether a hospital is making actual losses or actual profits. So very important for these things. And then day on day, we also have certain metrics that we capture. We call it the KPIs or key performance indicators. So we have in a hospital setup, you will have clinical KPIs. When you say clinical key performance indicators, so KPIs, clinical KPIs could be your infection rate, your mortality rate, your morbidity rate, your collapsy rate, your UTI rate. Those are all clinical parameters that we capture to see if your doctors and nurses and surgeons are doing the right things. So that's again metrics which are captured and say whether you're clinically doing the right thing for the patient. Then we talk about non-clinical KPIs. Non-clinical key performance indicators. That is your ARPOB. What is an ARPOB? So we calculate something called an average revenue per occupied bed, right? And so when you say average revenue per occupied bed, so you have n number of patients who are getting admitted in your hospital. We see we average it out and see how much revenue is that bed giving for that particular day, for that particular discharge. Then you calculate something called a metric called ALOS. And A loss is average length of stay. So, especially in a package, what happens? When I say package, suppose somebody undergoes an open heart surgery. So we say the open heart surgery will cost you 3 lakhs. So they pay that package amount upfront. And so you calculate the A loss and say this is a 9-day package. So very important for us to stick on to the 9-day, but then things can go wrong. You know, healthcare, there's nothing predictable. Yeah, you could end up with an infection stay longer than that 9 days package. So very important for us to track and monitor an average length of stay of a patient. So those are some of the few non-clinical KPIs that you might monitor. Could be receivables, could be aging of payments. All these are important metrics that we take. Then there's something called the liquidity ratio. Again, comes to cash flow. The liquidity ratio is nothing but how much liquidity does a particular hospital have, that is cash flows have, to pay its debtors. So the more liquid, the more cash flows, the better financially off you are. So that's called your liquidity ratio. So how is your liquidity ratio? So liquidity ratio is captured as it again comes down to your debt. I'm sure you must have heard of debt equity ratio as well. So something like that. So you have your current assets divided by your current liabilities. That's called the liquidity ratio. Current assets divided by your current liabilities is something called the liquidity ratio. Then you have something called accounts receivable. So when I say accounts receivable, again, it boils down to cash flows. So what is accounts receivable? So accounts receivable is nothing but your net patient service revenue plus 365 equals days of revenue that a patient's account receivables is accrued. So you calculate the aging of a particular patient's debt, that is, the patient has not paid yet. So very important for us to have a tab on. So the healthy ratio is about 60 to 70 days that you need to get back the money for a service rendered to a debt patient, DEBT, when I say debt patient. Yeah. So that's another ratio that we're talking about. Then you're talking about operating margins. Operating margins are nothing but your operating income divided by net sales equals operating margin. The operating margin is ratio of operating income divided by net sales. Then you do something called profitability analysis or profitability ratios. So what are the profitability ratios? Not all the gross revenues that a hospital makes is profits, right? Because you need to pay your vendors for your medicines, given your capital amortization gets minus your equipment that you own cost for, your CT machine that you own cost for, your payouts, your doctor payouts, nurse payouts, employee payouts, all that minus the gross revenue that hospital has made is nothing but profitability ratios, right? So a profitability ratio, profit margin is sales divided by cost of goods sold. That is the profits in sales, right? So your gross profit margin is say cost of goods sold divided by sales. So that's your profitability ratio. Then you have something called a very interesting thing called a solvency ratio. It's also called capital structure ratio. This is nothing but, when you say solvency ratio, it is the long-term debt included in the hospital's capital. The long-term debt included in the hospital's capital. The strength of hospital's capital structure can be measured by several ratios. A frequently used ratio is the debt equity ratio, which I spoke to you earlier, which means the capacity of the hospital to make debt service payments, that is, interest expense plan by the principals from operations. The ratio should be at least 2, which is a long-term debts divided by shareholders' equity. That is a debt equity ratio, which should be at least 2. So these are some of the common ratios that we talk about. Then there's something else that we talk about. Profit per discharge. Again, profit per discharge is the overall measure of the amount of profit that is directly made by the hospital. The ratio is directly related to the pattern of price and cost increase in the industry. The calculation of a profit per discharge is net income divided by the number of unadjusted discharges equals your profit per discharge. So net income divided by number of unadjusted discharges is your profit per discharge. Then the other metric that we usually calculate is your bed occupancy. The indicator is a measure of the volume and utilization of inpatient services. It is calculated as total patient days divided by total beds into 365, that is annualized. So that's what I was talking about, occupancy rates and your ALOS average, and then comes your average length of stay. The indicator describes the average stay of all patients or a class of inpatients discharged over a given period of time. It is used as an indicator of efficiency in containing inpatient services, calculated as total patients' days divided by total discharges. So these are some of the metrics that's very important as ratios for a hospital administrator to keep a tab on. Because if you do not have these ratios as a report which comes to you on a day-on-day basis or a quarter-on-quarter basis, you're not going to make any financial decisions. So you make your financial decisions based on these numbers and ratios that you monitor day in and day out. So that's largely how hospital ratios and financial reports is very much what you learn in your MBAs and your textbooks. And I'm sure you would have done projects in many industries, but so we run the same way. Hospital industries very much nascent compared to other industries. It's still getting organized. But having said that, the scale of economies that that a hospital talks about, 8.2 trillion US dollars, is huge, and it's one of the largest driving economies in any industry. So as MBA graduates and aspirants, you might ask, what do we have? What is the scope of our opportunity? Like I'm always asking me, you speak on opportunities for MBA graduates in the healthcare industry. So the opportunities in the healthcare industry for MBAs are huge, and we're always looking for bright, young, qualified talent to enter the industry, especially with the integration of emerging technology. So today it's not just about large buildings put up and you just get in doctors there and then patient starts going in. No. The future cannot be an extension of the past. We cannot run the hospitals how we ran 20 years ago. So it's all changing, right? It's like, I call it the Amazon moment in healthcare. So today you have a click of a button, you have an app, and then you get your groceries to your doorstep, right? So something like that. So you will have an amalgamation of technology and IT with healthcare. So especially during the pandemic, I remember we've seen we started online consultations. Who would ever imagine that doctors would do online consultations, online diagnosis? So that's all possible. It became possible, especially say if you take an endocrinologist, if you take a diabetologist. The patient doesn't need to go to a diabetologist to the hospital in person. The reason is for diabetes, as you definitely know, all that the doctor needs to check is blood sugar level, your HbA1c, your fasting blood sugar level, your postprandial blood sugar level, see those readings and tweak the insulin and diet according to those things. So these things close to about 8,000, we see close to about 8,000 online consultations per month in diabetes. So like this, most of them would become technology fronted, AI, BI fronted healthcare management. And going forth, patients will come only when they need intensive care therapy or treatment to the hospitals. If not, it will be managed at home. So when you say AI, you talk about artificial intelligence, you're talking about devices, wearables. So you will have a patient having ECG electrodes connected to his chest, and which can then be beamed out into the BI platform, and a doctor sees, and then we can monitor from the hospital, and nurse can monitor from the hospital. The patient is still staying at home. He's not come there. These are called wearables, and wearables or devices. So today you have iPhones, right, which can measure your pulse, your heart rate, and then that can be connected to your ECG electrodes and can give you ECG waveforms. There are so many things which are possible electronically today. So that's called IoT and the machine learnings. And so as far as an MBA aspirant is concerned, you have huge career opportunities. It could be in healthcare, insurance, healthcare IT, healthcare hospital administration. It could be hospital analytics is a huge thing today. So when you say hospital analytics, you're talking about business intelligence tools. You can work with our IT people and create business intelligence tools, business intelligence verticals, separate verticals. Like we, for example, in our organization, we have something called the BI. So what happens, it's an app that we just open, and that gives you, that shows you a trend of what is your revenues, what is your cost, what are your consumption cost, what is your EBITDA thing. So this can project for the month where you're heading. So that's financially, it gives you a heads up on what's going wrong, what's not going too good. And the same way, even clinically, through the BI, we can monitor what is a ex-doctor's mortality rate, infection rate, morbidity rate. So all these are there at the click of a button in the BI. So you all can get into that space as well. So these are a few things. Then you can get into, it's not just confined to hospitals. If you get into pharmaceutical companies, you can get to medical devices manufacturing companies and diagnostics. So it's large, and then you can get into my shoes. You can become administrators. You can become operations managers. You can work in the space of telemedicine, NGOs, lifestyle clinics is something that we are looking at. Outpatient care centers, outreach care centers, and so these are some of the very few areas that we're looking at. So I'm sure you all would have come from varied backgrounds of Radhani, and some of you might be having medical backgrounds as well. You would have done your nursing, and then some of you could be dentists, and some of you could be MBBS doctors who are now specializing in management. So for those people with a medical background, you can definitely get into medical administration. Yeah, medical administration. And those who are in non-clinical, non-medical backgrounds can always aspire to, get into the financial services, operational services, so those kind of things. But then the scope is huge and phenomenal for management graduates to get into healthcare. I will be open to field any questions that you have in any of those things which I spoke about, right from your economies and financial ratios to anything on your opportunities. It's I leave the floor open to all of you to ask me questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pasangha. I think you really gave us an insight into what is happening in the hospital administration and in this healthcare sector. Because for us, we just go there as patients, or we go and come. We don't really look into what type of investments and what's the work that happens and how people management really happens there. So as students of business administration, I mean, definitely they would be interested in understanding how they fit in and what exactly they need to really look into also when they look into this healthcare sector. So questions? Finance students, questions?
Hello, sir. I'm Avishma Alva. So there are various technical courses in relation to finance out there. So my question is, can you suggest one such technical financial course that will help us to outshine from other finance MBA students?
Yeah, I think you have a lot of these courses from other management institutes. So you have finance for medical healthcare professional. You have finance for people who are aspiring to get into medical tourism or things. So there's many other things which places like I don't know about your college, but then IIM for that matter, there are a lot of these one-year programs. And I would suggest, since you're already MBA students, I would suggest you can go look for something on a kind of 1-year remote programs. That so you don't need to stop working, you can continue working and do something called an executive management program, which forays into the specific could be financial, could be operational, could be qualitative and quantitative, could be any of these things. But then a lot of courses available for you if you want to specialize in a particular thing after you graduate. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Shivani Suvarna. I wanted to know what is the importance of NABH to an hospital. Is it important to be certified under it, and what are the benefits the hospital certified under it enjoy?
Yeah, good question. So these are nothing NABH and the National Accreditation Board of Hospitals, NABH, and the KCCI, that is the Joint Commission International. That's an international accreditation body. NABH is more of a national accreditation body. So these are stamps of quality. Yeah. So typically very important. And then I remember many years ago, we used to be known as a low-cost, affordable hospital. And when we said that we want to do a JCI for a hospital, people are asking, why you're a low-cost, affordable hospital? Why should you do a JCI? I said precisely the reason why we should do a JCI accreditation. The reason is because then you're saying that you're not cutting corners, you're not compromising in quality. And that is precisely why you need these accreditation for your hospitals. That gives you a stamp of standard quality of care. So they give you defined SOPs. When I say SOPs, your standard operating procedures. So you define and lay out, this is how a particular thing will be done. An SOP for a clinical thing, an SOP for a non-clinical KPI. So these are defined by these accreditation bodies. So that gives you a stamp of quality of care. It's very important for the hospital to have that. So then the patients also have trust in the particular hospital because they know it's accredited by a national body. So it's extremely important.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir. This is
Yeah.
Sonia.
Yes, Sonia.
Being a management student, how can I start my career in the healthcare industry? From where should I start? Or what are the skills I need to be part of this industry?
So it depends on your aptitude. So if you have an aptitude for people skills, you like to interact with people, you like to be on the shop floor. So you can start as a management trainee in the operations desk. You could start as an operations manager. You can study the workflow, you can study patient feedbacks, you can study how your time motion analysis of a particular patient to meet the doctor, turnaround times. So that's called operations managers. So they are on the ground dealing with patients, dealing with doctors. So if that's in case you have an aptitude, you have a penchant to meet and interact with people. Suppose you're not a very people's person, you can get into back-end work. So when you say back-end work, you can get into getting financial reports, writing down summaries, looking at ratios, looking at clinical performance indicators. So that's a back-end job. So you could be working in the finance department, you could be working in the accounts department, you could be working in the projects department. When you say projects department, we have projects team, which is a set of architects. And then you have an MBA, so you can do something called a fees. So suppose somebody comes and says, "Can we put a hospital there? That will cost so much." And then you put a management person there and ask him, "Can you do a feasibility study on this particular project and give us a report whether it's going to be feasible for us economically or not?" And then you, as management graduate, will do something called financial analysis. Then you come out on a return on investment. You come out with an IRR. What's an IRR? Internal rate of return, right? And then based on these, then we take a call whether to put up the project or not. So you could be employed in that. So there's so many other things. So it could be operational, it could be non-operational backend, and this is what you can do. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Hello, sir. I'm
Yeah.
Shraddha. So my question is there any policies where the hospital gives special discounts to the patients who cannot afford the treatment? If so, then how will it affect in the finance department, sir?
Yeah, so what happens is, yes, as I told you, 80% of the Indian population pay out of pocket, and only about very few of them are covered by insurance. I think less than about 15 to 20% are covered by insurance. Remaining of them are all paying out of pocket. So you do have times when a person who's not a person from a lower middle class thing, he has, say for example, has a cancer of the bone marrow, and then so then you need to do something called a bone marrow transplant. Basically, it affects a lot of children. And when you say it affects children, you're talking about young parents who just probably started their livelihoods, not much of savings. And the BMT costs anywhere between 10 to 15 lakhs. So it's a huge amount of money. So patient obviously cannot afford. And we don't generally deny patients treatment, especially life-threatening. It's not a lifestyle treatment, it's a life-threatening treatment. That's two different things. We call lifestyle surgeries and you have life-saving surgeries. When you say lifestyle surgeries, you're talking about a surgery for probably obesity. It can be a knee replacement for an arthritic knee. It could be tummy tuck, it could be scar removal. Those are lifestyle surgeries, which are not life-threatening. Life-threatening are typically could be cancer, could be bone marrow, as I told you. So these could be kidney failure, kidney transplants, which is needed, liver transplants, which are needed. And these cost a large amount of money. So one of the things that we do is we do something called crowdfunding. If you do a lot of crowdfunding, so we ask philanthropists and other NGOs to pitch in. So we make a case presentation of this child needs money. We look at the income of this particular parent and see what is the annual income for the family. Based on that, we move things like crowdfunding. And that's one of the areas that we help these patients with. So we don't discount completely, but then at least if it covers our costs, that is, it covers the cost of implants, covers the cost of consumables, pharmacy, and then as long as we don't make losses, we just make costs, and there is a sponsor available, then we go ahead and do the particular treatment. Because even to make charity affordable, we need to be sustainable. So we do not allow us to go down below the cost that is incurred by the hospital. So we give a discount to that extent and allow sponsors to pay the remaining amount. And we do not make margins on that particular treatment for that particular low income patient.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. My name is Shama. What are the digital advancements in the field of finance in hospitality, sir?
In a sense, so when I say digitization, so we're looking at, when it comes to things, we're looking at EMR, that's electronic medical records. So most of the hospitals now, we are in the thing of going completely paperless. When you say completely paperless, there were times when the patient would come, enter, then he registers into a file, then he fills up a form, and then he goes to the billing counter, makes a billing, stands in a queue. Then after that, he goes and meets the doctor. The doctor sits there, starts writing this medical form, takes on the medical history, then writes a diagnosis, writes a treatment plan, writes on the number of medicines that he has to take, and again gives that form and file to the patient. And then, so these were all very, very stationary-centric processes. And we incur a lot of expense on stationery per se in a particular patient encounter to the hospital. When you say going EMR, is when you say you go going completely paperless. So when you say go completely paperless, you're talking about a patient registering online. In the comfort of his home, he makes the registration in a system, online registration. He makes an appointment online. And when he comes home, he also does the payment online for consultation, right? It's like booking your cinema tickets. You can go booking airfare tickets. You can book it. I think you can even choose which seat you want to sit in. and pay. So when the patient comes to the hospital, he can walk in straight to the doctor's chamber and get his consultation done. So by doing this digitization, or doing this EMR, you save a lot on this patient stationary cost. And not only that, you also get a very seamless encounter between the patient and the doctor. So that's one of the major advantages of going digital.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So we have also to develop apps. We have an app which we develop. So the patient doesn't even need to go to a laptop or a desktop or a computer. In the comfort of, I think most of them have smartphones today. So in the smartphone, you just open the app and you can do all the registrations, payments, everything online itself. And in case the patient doesn't want to come to the hospital, doesn't need, you do an online consultation just with his mobile and the doctor sitting in the hospital. He doesn't need to come there. So those are the advantages of having online and digital interventions. Something like also we have something called robotic surgeries that's done now. Yeah, so robotic surgery is what the surgeon doesn't need to go to the patient's bedside. Yeah, so you have a robot, and the patient lies on the operation theater bed. The surgeon is sitting somewhere in the corner in the console. Yeah. So just with monitoring the system and with this, I think, and he can make out where are the blood vessels. The incision is done by the robot, and he just monitors the joystick there or the console there, and the surgery is done. So this again is another advantage of, this is what I was talking about, advances in technology, which was not there earlier. But then, and robotic arm is that much more flexible and dexterous than the human arm, because the robotic arm can turn 360 degrees, can do many maneuvers which a human hand cannot do. So when you say robotic surgery, you also have advantages because you don't have, because of the precision, you don't have unnecessary blood loss, and the patient's length of stay is again come down because the blood loss is not there, and the patient can get discharged home faster. So those are some of the advantages in, when I talk about digital, when you talk about technology application, cutting edge technology. These are some things that prove beneficial both to the patient and to the hospital and to the healthcare industry.
Thank you all for the active participation. I would like to thank Mr. Joseph Pasangha for sharing his valuable time and knowledge with us. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session.
Welcome. Thank you to Dr. Mauli and the management for giving an opportunity to interact with you. It was very lively and engaging. Thank you so much.